Okay, y'all, I ended that, or the screen ended that on a very dangerous place to end something. I was talking about using the Lord's name in vain, and when you say, God damn this, you're asking God to destroy. That's what damn means. You're asking God on your behalf to destroy something. That's a very serious thing to ask God to do, and when you're in relationship with God. So we don't use those kind of words as a cuss because it is requesting God to do something. And in this particular case, when the word damn means to destroy or to build up or hold up, you're making a very serious request of God to destroy something. And you better think twice before you pray that. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even pray that. I would ask God just to do his business in a situation that may be troubling you. But I wouldn't ever give God a command. Number one, he's God. You're not. I'm not. Second of all, if you just say it as a cuss word, whether it's that or any other, sometimes people will say, Jesus Christ. And it's like, that's not okay to just say that. His name is not a cuss. His name is holy. His name is to be called on when you're in need and when you want to give him worship. And if you just treat it in vain, just for nothing, that's what in vain means, is I'm just saying his name in vain for no good reason. Do you really expect him to come to your aid then when you need him and you call his name? Y'all, this is very, very serious. When you use the Lord's name in vain, it doesn't have to be with a cuss, a nasty word, or an obscene word, which the Bible also tells us in the New Testament even to refrain from using obscene language, because it's offensive, y'all. But more importantly, that's to others. Okay, so when you are, even if it's regional, like I know there's some words that are used, no problem in upstate New York, but when you're down in the South, it's considered a cuss, and vice versa, maybe. I'm not trying to put the North against the South or anything like that. I'm just saying if you know something could be offensive to another person in your language, stop it. And truly, more importantly, when you are using the Lord's name, it should be to glorify him, to worship him, and to lead others to him, or to call on him. But never just to say, oh God, or oh my God. We don't say things like that. I'm saying them now to talk to you about it. So anybody goes, Beth, you're doing it right now. Okay, that's the legalistic stuff. I'm saying it so that we can talk about it and learn why it's wrong and what to do. Sometimes I'll say, oh my gosh, like as a exclamation. And I don't use OMG because if they think I'm saying, oh my God, then I'm using God's name like it's nothing. That's in vain. God's saying, my name is holy. You don't use my name like it's nothing. The Jews wouldn't even either say his name or write it down. That's why we'll get into that. But that's how much they honored God. And we just do it like it's no big deal. And that's just generations over time who've allowed it and who have said, it's no big deal. God doesn't mind. Beg to differ with you. He just said he does very much mind because it is just watering down your relationship with him. So let's don't do that because God said don't do that. There's also some interesting little things, and this will happen a lot when we're reading Leviticus, but one of them to me is in verse 25 of chapter 20, where it says, if you make an altar of stones to me, do not build it with dressed stones, or for you will defile it when you use a tool on it, and do not go up to my altar on the steps, because your private parts might be exposed. I remember I sat there a minute and thought, what? What, God? What's these little details? Well, first of all, again, God will give special instructions about building altars that were to be a place to stop, a ritual to be recognized, to honor God. So those altars that were built to sacrifice to him, he purposely gave us rules and regulations to keep idolatry from creeping in. And the reason he didn't allow the altar stones to be shaped or cut or in any way is because they may try to build it into a form, like one of their multi-gods that they had worshipped before, like a cat or who knows what. But and God just didn't let them build an altar anywhere. He told them where to do things. Why? Why did he do that? God gives us instructions so we'll listen. And it's like, why? It's like, so we'll listen to him. It's to listen to him. And to prevent them from starting their own little religions by taking what he says and instead of doing it the way he wants things done, for them to tweak it. God doesn't need us to tweak it. So when you start seeing people tweaking things, it's like, don't do that. And what's your reason? It's one thing to be creative, but it's another thing to create a new religion. And God's saying no on that. You can be creative how you do things, but don't go outside of the basic instructions I've given you. Can you be creative with decor for the church? Of course. But can you start doing a new thing? Like, we're going to start a new thing where we have the cross upside down. And we're going to call that cross Christ number 2. Or, okay, now you're building another faith. You're not just being creative with how things are. So, and always get the elders of the church, get people that you know who are older and wiser and in the Word of God and their life shows it. Ask them, am I misunderstanding this? And if you are, stop. It's not that important. Stop it. Why would you continue to go forward with something creative that's not, being creative is not more important than following what God wants and the way He wants things done. Okay, so now in chapter 21, this is about servants. And y'all, this is going to be a touchy situation because I'm not a professional and I don't pretend to be. Let's just get into it. All right, so Hebrew servants. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, you're supposed to let him go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he's free to go alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she's to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons and daughters, and the women and her children shall belong to the master, but only the man shall go free. Now, some people reading that going, that just ain't right. Okay. First of all, when God gives laws, it's because there has to be consequences for actions that are taken in this world. Okay? That's what justice is. So God starts giving these laws. What He's asking you to do is to think, to plan today what the consequences of your choices are tomorrow for you and for the people around you, and that all people are to be treated with honor, dignity, and respect. Now, is there a slave system? Yes. It's interesting because even though the Hebrew people had been delivered from slavery, they had slaves or servants themselves. What do you mean, Beth? We automatically in America start thinking about American slavery of black people who were unwillfully, against their will, brought into a slave system from Africa. They were treated brutally. And it was the most important thing was whether they were treated brutally or well, it was against their will. Their freedom was taken away. Okay, so there's our picture of slavery, but that is not the only picture of slavery in the world. Matter of fact, that hasn't even come into play yet. Here, a person, by an act of their own free will, could choose to be enslaved because they were more impoverished than others. They were in a debt, or even they had committed a crime. And they would say, I would like to be an indentured servant, meaning I would like to be a servant to pay off my debt. In other words, not everybody had money. You got to think about what the money system even was. And so, but they were treated as human beings. And they were treated, as you see here, in a orderly way. Now, here's a footnote that's in this Life Application Bible, which I love, and I think it's the best footnoted study Bible I've ever used, including the NIV Study Bible and any other study Bibles. I've got tons of them. Every time one comes out, I go and buy it and see, and I always come back to this, because it seems to give the best notes on life application, historic note, and validity, but sometimes opinion is in here, and it's in this 21 to note. It says, but Hebrew slaves were treated as human, not property, and were acknowledged to work their way to freedom. That part's true, about working their way to freedom. The Bible acknowledges the existence of slavery, but never encourages it. There's 2 lines in there that's just not true. And here's one of them. Were they considered property? They most certainly were. And especially what I just told you, yes, they were considered property, because by enslaving themselves, they were paying off a debt or fulfilling the requirements of being brought to justice after committing a crime. And so, yes, they were considered property. And also, where did I see it? Where it says, for they are your property. Oh, right here. 21 verse 21. It says, "But if the slave recovers within a day or two, then the owner shall not be punished, since the slave is his property." Footnote wrong. And when it says it doesn't encourage slavery, but simply acknowledges it, it's like, no, that says you can be a slave. And it's okay to treat them as a slave. Why? Because these people had entered into an agreement that must be honored. And that is a point of justice and rightness. This is a system that worked then. It's still, the concept of it can play out even today, where if you entered into agreement with someone and say, I'll do this if you'll forgive me that, whether it's a debt or whatever, you have to honor that once you make that. And if part of that in this day included whatever servanthood came over time, like the wife getting married, having children, and those children were now a part of it, that was part of the agreement. This is a hard concept for us, and I don't pretend to totally understand it, but I think that's the best I can make of it. And I just think it's careful sometimes in the footnotes that you just go with whatever they say. Think it through yourself. And maybe that's all they meant by their footnote was, well, it wasn't saying that that humans were to be treated as property and badly. But if you read some of this, you might consider that bad treatment. It's just you got to remember what was the situation of that day, and how did it apply? Was it because you made an agreement but you failed to keep it? Because that's not okay. Don't enslave yourself. Don't indebt yourself if you cannot keep to your end of the bargain, because now you've made a covenant, a promise, a agreement, and God is simply saying that must be honored. And